Howdy, friendly neighborhood Vermonter here, out on the porch, having a pipe in the cut-off Dr. Graybo. I'm going to do a video about knife sharpening today. So this video is going to be in 3 sections. First section is I'm going to talk about the tools that it takes to sharpen a knife, the stones, the steels, things like that. Secondly, I'm going to talk about knives and different types of steel, different types of metal. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about how to put those together and sharpen your knife. So this is my collection of sharpening tools. Up here I've got a sharpening stone that's got 2 sides to it, a coarse side and a fine side. And this is just a cheap sharpening stone, nothing special. It's kind of nice to have a beater stone for, machetes or, just to kind of get your knife going. Secondly, I have a stone that was passed on to me from my grandfather. And I don't know if you can see that there. It's an old whetstone from Moravia, Iowa. And it also has 2 different sides. But this is a very, very smooth and very nice stone. This side here feels like polished marble. That's for getting a super fine edge. And probably the tool I use the most is this nifty little thing made by Buck, which is a sharpening steel, but it is a diamond coated sharpening steel. And it has sort of an elliptical shape to it. And this is really nice just for kind of maintaining your edge. And of course, cooking in kitchens, a nice ceramic plate, an old chef's trick, is the footing on the back of it is never glazed. And it's kind of a rough ceramic. And if you need a real quick touch up on your edge, you can run your blade across that. And it's pretty much the same as a steel. But I'll show you that in a minute. Now some of our visual aids here. Your matchbook. Now in culinary school they talk to us a lot about the angle that you approach the stone or the steel. And they used to say that a matchbook is the correct angle. So that's my visual aid. We'll get into that later. And also when you're just starting out, a real handy thing to have is a red permanent marker. And on a knife that's a little bit cheaper, you mark the edge, and you can sort of see how your progress is going as you're sharpening by marking the edge and seeing what gets worn off. And finally, good old-fashioned newspaper. This is for when you're completely done with the sharpening process, and to polish the edge, you rub it across some newspaper. There's the new pipe box. But that is another video. Right now, we're going to talk about metal. Now, they use a lot of different metals in knives. And starting on this end, this is a high carbon steel knife. You can tell because they have that sort of gray, dull color to them. They tend to be very flexible, and you can put a hell of an edge on these. Razor sharp edge. The only trouble is they tend to rust and they're much more high maintenance. Now this is your standard German kitchen knife, stainless steel, which means they've added some other metals into the steel to help give it some corrosion resistance. Can't quite get as sharp of an edge with these, but you can do pretty well. One of my favorite knife companies, Gerber, they don't use the greatest steel in the world. It tends to wear and dull pretty fast, but it's easy to sharpen. And if you're just starting out sharpening knives, Gerber is a great choice. You can go to Walmart, pick one of these suckers up for 25 bucks, 30 bucks, something like that. And you'll have to sharpen it a lot, and then you'll get good at sharpening. And finally, Buck, I think, is one of the best stainless steel knives out there. They've been making stainless steel for years and years and years, and they've pretty well refined the process. And this stuff is pretty darn good. You can get this to a really sharp edge. And again, nice corrosion resistance and real tough. I like those knives quite a bit. So there's a small selection of what you'll find as far as metals go. Now to start with, what I'm going to do is the old trick they taught you in culinary school. So you take this silvery part right here. The Japanese call that the blade road. That's the part that's going to get ground. So you take your red magic marker and you just very carefully color that in. Now, as you're going along, I suppose I ought to do both sides. And as you're going along, that will grind off. And you get an idea if you're doing it properly. Because you're trying to, if you look at the edge of that knife, there's two angles on there. And what you're trying to do on the stone, you don't want to lay it flat, and you don't want to have it way up here. You need to match the angle of that blade road. Now if you're doing it properly, you'll rub off just the red ink. And that's hopefully what we're going to go for. So you start flat, tip it up. Now if you're not sure how far to tip it up, put that pack of matches in there. And that's about right. It's a good way to kind of measure it. But you got to develop this muscle memory. Like I said, it's not that you have to get the angle exactly right. It's that you have to repeat it, and you have to be consistent with your angle. I'm sure my angle isn't perfect, but I do it the same way every time, so I can be consistent. Now you hold the top of the blade, the side of the blade, and you just kind of sweep it. And you can add a little bit of water, or beer, or whatever you got handy. And you kind of firmly push it down and then across. Down and across. And for the reverse, you just do the same thing. Like I said, this is all muscle memory. You just got to get this down. You know, so get your angle right. And you're just drawing it towards you and across. If you just went like this, you wouldn't get the tip. So this is why you draw it across. And again, across. Like that. Now you want to do it equally and evenly on each side. Wearing off the red ink. It's working pretty good. Now this is my handy dandy diamond coated sharpening steel. And it's roughly the same concept with this. As you start at the top, you draw it across. Draw it across. And then you flip it and draw it up. And again, match that angle. Now again, mine tends to be a little bigger than the matchbook, but it's pretty much the same every time, and consistency is key. Down to the tip. There you go. And these are great because the diamond coating removes a little bit of material, but very little, much less than a stone. So for maintaining an edge, this is my favorite tool. And finally, the old chef's trick here. Ceramic plate. And just feel the rough footing on the end. Now don't let your wife catch you doing this, or your husband, if they're particular about their dishes, because it does kind of mark them up, you'll see. But in a pinch, this works great, if you've got nothing else. So again, watch your angle, get the proper tilt on it, and just draw it across. Flip it, do the same thing. It's almost like you're petting a cat. A little bit of pressure, but not too much. Oh yeah. As you can see, it kind of marks up the plate a bit, so might want to get a paper towel and wipe that off before you get in trouble. When you're done sharpening, not bad, you can polish the edge with a piece of newspaper, which again I learned from this Japanese guy whose family used to make samurai swords but now makes kitchen knives. And he came and did a little tutorial when I was at school, and he was showing everybody how to sharpen knives, and this was the last thing he did with his knife. And again, angles. It's all about the angles. Put your knife down flat, stick your little matchbook thing, check the angle, and you just kind of draw it towards you on the edge. Flip it over, push it away. It's the opposite of when you're on the stone, because when you're on the stone, you're doing this. When you're on the paper, you're drawing back. And this just takes care of some metal burrs and kind of polishes up the edge and puts a real nice fine sharpness on it. In the old days, they might use a piece of leather for this, but I find the newspaper's nice. It's, you know, it's disposable. It's always hanging around, and I think it does a little bit better job than the leather. Because after a while, the leather kind of gets full and crudded up, and you don't want to buy a new piece of leather every time you turn around, but buying a newspaper every time you do it, it's not a real big deal. So after you get the knife sharpening bit down, there's other things to sharpen as well. I have a little machete I use around the house, my hatchet. That's a little different. Again, I got my kind of junky thrift shop stone here. And with a bigger item, you don't necessarily want to do the whole table thing. What I tend to do is hold the stone. Man, that's got a wicked ding in it. So anyway, again, match your angle. You're trying to match the angle of the blade. And you just run it down. Nice, consistent strokes. And then flip it to the other side. And do the whole thing again. Make sure you try to do even number of strokes on each side. And again with the axe, same sort of thing. Hold it firmly. Take the stone in one hand. And again, match your angles. Always be aware of that angle. And if you're not sure, get your handy dandy matchbook. You can check your angle. But again, even number of strokes on each side. Now if we're just touching up, usually I use the stone dry. But if you're really trying to put an edge on something or something's really dull, the best thing to do with one of these is to soak it in a container of water for about an hour and to let the pores really soak up some water. I see a lot of people kind of spit on it and just rub water on the surface, which is alright, again, for quick touch-ups. But if you're really putting an edge on it and you're really putting that stone to work, the best way to do that is to soak it in some water. So that's it. Go out and get yourself a nice little diamond coated steel, and even a junky old stone will work. And get to it, you know? Like I said, cheap knife from Walmart. And practice, practice, practice. Watch your angles and be consistent. That's really the key. So, good luck. Cheers. And at the end, when you're done with your sharpening, to polish the fucking motorcycle.